so we'll be now moving to the next topic natin. So would be, pag-usapan natin today is all about nervous system, di ba? Just a brief overview of the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system, di ba? So also the neurologic assessment, di ba? For neurologic function, yung mga diagnostic test na ginagawa natin, and also yung mga neurological disorder. So today, ang pag-usapan natin is all about spinal cord injury. On the next day or the other time, mayroon pa po tayong mga other topics that is related to problem with your nervous system. Okay, so let's start with the nervous system. So sabi natin, nervous system, this is the organized network of nerve tissue in your body or sa katawan natin. So it works by sending message or electrical signals between your brain and all other parts of the body. So ibig sabihin, di ba yung nervous system, siya yung nagsesend ng signal, siya yung nagko-communicate, siya yung nag-uutos, di ba, kung paano magagawa. And also, di ba, dyan din, halimbawa, tinusok ka ng ballpen, natusok ka ng karayo. So siya yung magsesend ng signal na eto palang part ng katawan ko yung natusok ng karayo. Di ba? Sabi natin, our brain has dalawang part, or our nervous system has two parts or two division. We have the central nervous system that comprises your brain, di ba? And your peripheral nervous system that comprises your spinal cord, which is dun po nakakonect yung mga nerves natin. Di ba? So diyan siya nag-send ng signal. Sabi natin, nervous system has the central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord that receives and processes and responding to sensory information. So diyan siya na-receive. Well, the peripheral nervous system, this is the nerves that extend from spinal cord to the rest of the body. Siya yung nakakonect na dyan. So both sending information from different areas of the body back to the brain and carrying commands from brain to various body parts natin. Okay? So let's start with central nervous system, the brain. Sabi natin, brain is an organ of nervous tissue responsible for responses. Diba? Paano tayo nakakapagsalita? Diba? Paano natin naiintindihan? Diba? Sensation, how tayo nakakaramdam? Diba? Movement, on how we move. Emotion, yun din po. Ba't ka nalungkot? Masaya? Diba? So, dyan po yan lahat sa ating brain natin. Same with communication, thought process, diba? Diyan ka nag-iisip. Diba? Sabi nga, dyan po na-i-store yung mga memory, diba? Yung mga bakas ng kahapon, diba? Yan yung brain ang may kasalanan kung bakit di ka maka-move on sa ex mo kasi dyan pa, nakastore pa dyan sa brain mo, diba? Your brain composed of, ano ba daw? We have the cerebrum, which is yung pinaka main brain natin. Sabi ito, a wrinkled appearance that is the result of many folded layers or convolutions called your gyri, which increase the surface area of the brain, accounting from high level of activity carried out by such a small appearing organ. So ito yung mismong brain natin, di ba? And ano daw? Between each gyrus is a sulcus or fissure that serve as an anatomic division. So di ba nahahati-hati yan? Di ba? We have the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, di ba? Merong suture, may hati yung brain natin. Sabi natin, your left hemisphere is responsible for what? For logic, for language, and mathematical abilities natin. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga magagaling sa math, magaling magsulat, yung mga magaling sa logic, yung left hemisphere of the brain yung gumagana. And the right hemisphere naman is ito na yung mga pagiging creative, artistic, music, yung mga intuition, yung mga pakiramdam mo sa right. So, ibig sabihin yung mga malakas yung pakiramdam natin. Diba? Ako. So, ito po yun. Kung titingnan natin, this is your cerebrum. Ito po. Ang buo na yan. Sabi natin, nahati siya sa dalawa. The left and the right. Okay? Yung sulcus, yung mga guhit-guhit na yan. And yung mismo yun yung gyrus natin. And on left and right hemisphere, meron tayong tinatawag na frontal lobe, parietal lobe, and temporal, tsaka occipital lobe natin. So, yung mga different lobe ng brain natin. Okay? And sabi nga, so you can remember, di ba sabi natin, kapag right-handed ka, yung left brain mo yung gumagana. Pag left-handed ka naman, yung right brain naman. So, magkabaliktad sila ng nagko-command. Okay? Next part of your brain is your cerebral cortex. Sabi natin, the outmost layer that surrounds the brain. Sabi nyo naka-over dyan. So, it is composed of gray matter and filled with billions of neurons to conduct high-level executive functions. So, ibig sabihin, yung cerebral cortex, siya yung dyan nagsasend ng signal, dyan lahat dumadaan. Yung mga neurons natin, dyan siya lahat na-store, yung mga messages, yung memory, lahat ng inaaral natin. So, sabi nga natin, divided to frontal lobe, parietal, occipital, and your temporal lobe. Okay? Your frontal lobe, ano daw ang trabaho ng frontal lobe? Sabi, it is responsible for voluntary motor function. Diba? Problem solving, attention, and memory, and your language, yung nasa harapan na yan. Okay? Sabi natin pa daw, motor cortex allows the precise voluntary movement of our skeletal muscle, while the Broca's area that controls, yun nasa may gitna po yun, control motor function responsible for producing language. Kung paano po tayo nagsasalita. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, if Broca's area is affected, dun yung nagkakaroon ng problem with speech or sa pagsasalita yung patient. Next is the parietal lobe. Sabi natin, separated from occipital lobe by the parieto-occipital sulcus, and it is behind the central sulcus, yung nasa gitna. So, ito po yung parietal lobe, yung color blue na yan sa picture natin. Ano naman daw ang trabaho niya? Responsible for processing sensory information and contains the somatosensory cortex natin. And the neurons in the parietal lobe receives information from sensory and proprioceptors throughout the body and form an understanding of what is being touched based on previous knowledge. So, ibig sabihin, halimbawa, hinawakan mo yung ballpen. Pag nakapikit, kahit nakapikit ka, alam mong ballpen yun. Diba? Halimbawa, alam mo yung matalim versus dun sa mapurol. Diba? Yun yung mga ginagawa natin, diba, nung nasa health assessment po kayo. Okay, ano pa daw? Occipital lobe, the visual processing center, contains the visual cortex. So, it receives information from retina and then uses past visual experiences to interpret and recognize stimuli. So, ibig sabihin, sa occipital lobe, dyan mo nabivisualize yung mga nakikita mo. Diba? Alam mo na ito pala si ganito. Yan, ito yung itsura ng ganyan. So, ibig sabihin yung occipital lobe natin. Diba? So, kung parang makalimot, pukpukin mo yung occipital lobe mo, hindi. Joke lang po yun. Okay? Ano pa daw? Temporal lobe, sabi naman dito, process auditory stimuli through your auditory cortex. So, yung hearing natin. Diba? Sound energy activates mechanoreceptors located in the hair cells lining of the cochlea, sending impulses to the auditory cortex. So, ibig sabihin, pagpasok ng sound dun sa ears natin, dyan na pupunta yung, dyan magsasend yung signal para ma-interpret brain natin, which is yung temporal lobe po natin. So, the impulse is processed and stored based on previous experiences, and Wernicke's area function in speech comprehension. So, ibig sabihin, yun yung gumagana, lalo yung magagaling, yung madadaming alam na words, di ba? Yung mga natatandaan nila. Next is your basal ganglia. Ano naman yung basal ganglia? Sabi natin, located deep within the cerebral white matter and comprise the caudate nucleus, pontamen, and globus pallidus. This structure form the pallidum and the stratum. And the basal ganglia are responsible for muscle movement and coordination. So, yun yung nasa base ng natin, ng ating brain natin. So, ibig sabihin, siya gumagana. Next is the thalamus. This is the brain relay center. So, ito yung It receives apparent impulse from sensory receptor throughout the body and process the information for this distribution to appropriate cortical area. So, ibig sabihin siya yung nagsasend ng kaya siya yung relay area, siya yung nagbibigay ng information. Diba? Bawa, nakahawak ka ng malamig, siya pupunta. So, susend niya dun sa may para malaman mong malamig yun. Diba? O mainit, diba? Siya yung isasend niya sa responsible area of our brain. So, it's also responsible for regulating consciousness and sleepness natin. So, ibig sabihin yung pagising natin, kasama po dyan. Next is the hypothalamus. Sabi, vital on maintaining the homeostasis. Diba? Yung, halimbawa, sa ano na nga lang, sa thirst mechanism natin, diba? Si hypothalamus yung magsasend ng signal kapag kulang na yung body fluid sa'yo. Siya yung sabi, ay, yung tao, uminom ka na kasi kulang na yung fluid sa katawan mo. Diba? So, yan. So, it connects the CNS to the endocrine system, responsible for heart rate, blood pressure, appetite, thirst, temperature, and release vigorous hormones. Diba? Nakakonect yan dyan. So, communicates with pituitary glands to release or inhibit yung antidiuretic hormone, corticotropin-releasing hormone natin, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, growth hormone, prolactin-inhibiting hormone, thyroid-releasing hormone, oxytocin. So, most of the hormones, di ba, dun sa thalamus connected sa pituitary glands natin. Okay, next part is your pons. That could be found in the brain stem and connect the medulla oblongata in the thalamus. So, siya, nakakonekta yan. So, ito makita niyo sa baba, di ba? Pons, di ba? Tapos, yung medulla oblongata din the spinal cord or papunta lang sa brainstem na. So, it comprises tract responsible for relaying impulses from motor cortex to the cerebellum, medulla, and your thalamus natin. Okay? Next is si medulla oblongata, located at the bottom of the brainstem where the spinal cord meets the foramen magnum of the skull. Diba yung butas doon sa skull natin, doon siya naka-connect. Ibig sabihin, si medulla oblongata, doon siya naka-locate. So, you're responsible for autonomic functions. Ibig sabihin, yung paghinga natin, yung pagtibok ng puso, diba, dyan siya kasama niya sa function niya. So, monitors body respiratory system using yung mga chemoreceptors, diba? These receptors can detect changes in your blood chemistry, cardiovascular or vasomotor center, diba? Pagtaas, pababa ng BP. Regulates the body blood pressure, pulse, cardiac contraction based on body's needs. So, ibig sabihin, siya yung magsasend ng signal. Halimbawa, kulang yung blood volume. So, sabihin niya, oh heart, bilisan mo yung tibok ng puso mo para ma-supply yung mga kailangan ng oxygen ng different organs ng isang tao. Also, it controls reflexes like vomiting, swallowing, coughing, and sneezing. So, di ba, ang daming trabaho ni medulla oblongata. So, ito po yung ating side view ng brain. So, pag himay-himay natin, is your pons, the medulla oblongata, and then connected na. So, ibig sabihin, nandito part na to yung foramen ovale. Diba? Diyan siya magdudugtong yung brain natin. Okay, next part of the brain is your cerebellum. Sabi natin, responsible for smooth, coordinated voluntary movement, balance and posture, and yung mga muscle tone natin. So, ibig sabihin, sa balance. So, ibig sabihin, kapag naapektuhan, di ba kaya hindi mapansin, bakit pag pinukpok dun sa may likodan ng ulo, malapit sa batok, di ba, nahihilo yung pasyente, nawawala ng malay. Kasi nga dyan po yung coordination and balance natin. So, it receives information from sensory system, spinal cord, and other parts of the brain, and then processes and integrates this information for fine-tune motor activity. So, ibig sabihin, para hindi ka nanginginig, di ba? Para makapagsulat ka ng maayos, di ba? So, di ba, para pag mag-insert ka ng IV, hindi nanginginig-nginig yung kamay mo, di ba? So, play a role in cognitive functions such as attention, language, and spatial perception. So, kasama rin po yan, di ba? Yung mga attention span. Next is the limbic system. So, process and regulates emotion and memory while also dealing with sexual stimulation and learning. Diba? So, yan yung mga favorite ninyo. Diba sabi nga, behavior motivation, long-term memory, and sense of smell. And also, diba si limbic system, diba dyan nga sabi nga, yung emotion, diba, ibig sabihin, kapag in love ka, si limbic system ang nagre-respond. So, siya yung responsable dyan kung bakit gustong-gusto mo yung isang tao. Kung bakit bulag na bulag ka sa kanya. Diba? Bakit gwapong-gwapo, pangit na pangit ka sa kanya. Ayan. Ayan. So, yan po yung mga parts na yan. Next is the reticular formation. Doon sa mata naman. Diba sabi natin, made up of net-like structure of various brainstem nuclei and neurons and covers an expansive portion of the brainstem beginning in the mesencephalon extending to caudally through the medulla oblongata and then projected into superior cervical spinal segment. So involving various physiological functions including the pain, sensitization, alertness, fatigue, sleep, and motivation. Also linked to the character traits such as yung pagiging introvert or extrovert ng isang tao. So ibig sabihin, paano mangyayari dyan? Halimbawa, yung nakita ng mata mo, diba? Magsesend siya ng, i-interpret niya papunta dito sa reticular formation. So, ibig sabihin, pag nakarating dyan, isesend niya iba-ibang parts ng brain para ma-interpret natin, para alam natin, diba? Kaya nga, halimbawa, hinawakan ka, or alam mo yung malamig, mainit, diba? O pag sa is naman, pag narinig mo, diba, kung nagko-correlate silang dalawa. Diba? Para ngayon, diba, yung sinasabi ko, naiintindihan nyo ba? Diba? Ayan, so, yung nakikita nyo, naiintindihan nyo ba? Diba? Yung, or kung nakatingin man kayo sa screen or hindi. Diba? So, next is the spinal cord. Sabi natin, a column of nerve tissue that runs from the base of the skull down to the center of the back, and it covers 3 thin layers of protective tissue called your membranes. Diba? The spinal cord and the membranes are surrounded by your vertebrae or your backbone. Sabihin yung mga buto na yan, dyan nagtatago, dyan sila nagpoprotekta para dun sa mga nerves natin na yan. Diba? Yung mga membranes na yan. So, healthcare electrical nerve signals throughout the body and these nerve signals help feel the sensation and move yung muscle. So, ibig sabihin, halimbawa, dito para gumalaw to, yung mga lower extremities natin, makaramdam tayo. Okay? So, pathophysiology, sabi natin, of the spinal cord. Ascending pathway to the brain. So, sabi natin, sensory information, first, second, and third neurons. So, sabi natin, first order neuron, ano daw? Impulse from the skin, then sent to the spinal cord. Halimbawa, ayan. So, para ma-differentiate mo, itong, halimbawa, yung feather, o napukpok ka, naipit ka, or napasok ka, or manghang. Diba? Sabi natin, send simula to the thalamus and the cerebellum. So, pupunta yan doon sa thalamus natin. Tapos, ano yung susunod niyan? So, somatosensory sensation and cerebrum natin. So, doon siya ngayon i-interpret. So, ibig sabihin, ngayon malalaman niya, mai-interpret na ngayon if may pressure ba, may pain, mainit, malamig, or ano yung nararamdaman natin. So, ibig sabihin, doon siya nagpo-flow doon sa spinal cord. Imagine mo gaano kabilis yung pagsesend ng signal na yun. Diba? So, by descending pathway naman, send motor signals from the brain down to the lower motor neurons. Diba? Yung efferent neurons natin then produce yung muscle movement. Ibig sabihin, dito naman, halimbawa, kung iiwasan mo yung halimbawa, sasaksakin ka, paano ka makaiwas? Diba? May mga reflex natin para nag-move yung mga muscles natin. Okay, sabi natin, your cells of the neurons of the nervous system, you have your neurons, which is the basic functional unit of your brain. And your neurons have dendrites, axon, myelin sheath, ganglia or nuclea, diba? The soma or the body, the synapse, the center, and the neurological cell. Sabi natin, the dendrites is a branch type structure of receiving electrochemical messages. Diba siya nagsisend? While the axon naman, sabi, long projection that carries electrical impulses away from the cell body. Okay? And the myelin sheath increases the speed of conduction. So, ibig sabihin, dyan siya dumadaan. And the ganglia or the nuclear nerve cells bodies occurring in clusters. So, yung sama-sama. So, the body. Synapses naman, place where neurons connect and communicate with each other. And the center, cluster of cell bodies with same function is called the center or the respiratory center. And neuroglial cells of 50 times greater in number than neurons serve as support, protect, and nourish yung mga neurons natin. So, ito po ang neurons. Sabi natin, iba yung neurons, we have the dendrites, the nucleus. Ito po yung myelin sheath. And dito siya dumadaan pa sa direction ng impulse natin. So, ibig sabihin, diyan papasok yung mga signals from different parts of the body para punta dun sa neurons para ma-interpret ng brain natin, para maintindihan natin kung ano yung nangyayari, para alam ng brain natin kung ano yung gagawin. Diba? So, sabi natin, the neurotransmitter, it communicates message from one neuron to another or from a neuron to specific target tissue. Diba? Manufactured and stored daw yan dun sa mismong in-store siya dun sa synaptic vesicles natin. So, ibig sabihin dun siya dumadaan. And an electrical action potential propagated along the axon reaches the nerve terminal, neurotransmitter are released into the synapse. And potentiate, terminates, or modulate a specific action that can be either excite, inhibit activity, or target cell. So, ibig sabihin, yung movement natin, dyan sila yung responsible. Yung responses natin. So, dyan siya lahat dumadaan sa neurotransmitter na yan. So, ibig sabihin, kapag may problem sa neurotransmitter, may nasira, yung, kumbaga sa text message, di ba? Or sa messenger, di ba? Pag nagkaroon ng problem doon sa server, di ba, hindi agad nakakagaling yung message. So, ibig sabihin, si neurotransmitter, siya yung responsible doon. Pero sobrang bilis niya kasi in just a snap, di ba, alam mo na agad kung natusok ka, kung in pain ka, di ba, nasesend na agad yung signal. Ano pa daw? So, neurotransmitter is responsible for epinephrine and norepinephrine. So, a fast-acting neurotransmitter adjusts your blood pressure, your heart rate, breathing, and digestion. Diba? So, the body releases in response to epinephrine, also called your adrenaline, usually increases during the period of excitement. Diba? Or kung nagkakaroon ka ng anxiety, masaya, malungkot, natatakot. Diba? While the norepinephrine naman, called your noradrenaline, has effects similar to epinephrine but often works a little slower and effects last a little longer. So, mas matagal si norepinephrine compare kay epinephrine.
Nestle Apple daw, boy.
Paano nga ulit ito mag-lock ng bagong watch?
3.
Opo, pamute po sana po.
3 o 4?
Pakimute po sana yung dyan.
Sa upuan, kaya sira nga pa dalawa ng upuan, ano?
Arado.
Ha?
Sira nga pa.
4, 3.
Madam, tapos iiwan mo na yan.
Arado.
Dadagdagan mo na.
Kasi iwanan mo na ganun, ano?
Oo. Okay, mo.
Okay, so, moving on. So, sabi natin, nasaan tuloy ako? So, moving on. Next is your acetylcholine. Sabi natin, it play a role in your memory and movement. Sabi natin, releases from motor neurons, nerve that's power muscles before binding to your muscle cells to stimulate yung movement natin. And during the dreaming stage of sleep, muscle movement is inhibited which prevents from moving and acting out the dream. So, ibig sabihin, di ba dapat, kapag natutulog ka, hindi ka naman dapat talaga gumagalaw. So, ibig sabihin, siya yung monitor niyan. Pero sometimes, di ba, merong mga natutulog na gumagalaw. So, ibig sabihin, yung may problem yung sa acetylcholine si patient natin. Okay, next is your neurotransmitter. Sabi natin, serotonin works with other neurotransmitter to mediate mood, di ba? Yung sleep, yung appetite, digestion, and yung immunity or other pa. So maraming ginagawa po yung ating serotonin. While the dopamine, sabi naman natin, involved regulating body fluids, movements, motivation, and addictive behaviors. Ibig sabihin yung mga bakit kaya paulit-ulit mo na lang siyang ginagawa. And the gamma aminobutyric acid or the GABA, so inhibits the activation of certain neurons and prevents brain damage and also involves in relaxation and sleep natin. So sa inyong mga ginagawa. Okay? So to discuss it further para mas makadad na additional information, so let's watch the video.
This is a brain. Estimates vary, but right now the best guess seems to be that our brains contain around 85 billion neurons. The neuron is a nerve cell, and it's the primary functional unit of the nervous system. This is a generic image of a neuron. Neurons actually come in all shapes and sizes, but this is the prototypical version of a neuron that you'll often see in a textbook. The structures extending from the left side of the neuron that look a little bit like tree branches are called dendrites. Dendrites are the area where neurons receive most of their information. There are receptors on dendrites that are designed to pick up signals from other neurons that come in the form of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Those signals picked up by dendrites cause electrical changes in a neuron that are interpreted in an area called the soma, or the cell body. The soma contains the nucleus, which contains the DNA, or genetic material of the cell. The soma takes all the information from the dendrites and puts it together in an area called the axon hillock. If the signal coming from the dendrites is strong enough, then a signal is sent to the next part of the neuron, which is called the axon. At this point, the signal is called an action potential. The action potential travels down the axon, which is covered with myelin, an insulatory material that helps to prevent the signal from degrading. The last step for the action potential is the axon terminals, also known as synaptic buttons. When the signal reaches the axon terminals, it can cause the release of neurotransmitter. These purple structures represent the dendrites of another neuron. When a neurotransmitter is released from axon terminals, it interacts with the receptors on the dendrites of the next neuron, and then the process repeats with the next neuron.
So, ganyan po yung nangyayari sa ating neurotransmitter. So, ibig sabihin, ulit-ulit lang siya para ma-send and receive yung signal and ma-interpret ng brain natin. Alright, may question po ba? May gusto bang i-clarify? Wala po. So, yan po ang ating introduction to the nervous system natin.